Good evening. This is our first live primetime broadcast. Usually I do afternoons, but our guest tonight could only be here on the prime time, which is kind of different for me. I'm Connor Exum of the Leon Trotsky podcast and newsletter. And we're joined today by Jeff Wiggins of the We Be Gonna All Right. We Gonna Be All Right. It's the gone part. I keep on saying it in my head without an E, and I just don't know where to put it. We Gonna Be All Right YouTube channel. And we're going to talk about, the ups and downs of being an independent creator. I mean, how hard it is to really get your stuff seen. I mean, there's no doubt that right now it's fallen off of a cliff. You can't get certain videos to view more than a couple of hundred. I mean, my podcast on Substack gets a lot more than my YouTube channel. And I don't understand why. They're both linked.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so once I load this up to my Substack, which I'm not actually running it on, I'm running it through StreamYard, which allows me to do both of them at once, a live broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
And, so once I upload it in about an hour to the Substack, it'll get 1,000 views, 1,500 views, 2,000, something like that. And YouTube, it'll get 30. And I'll get like 2 subscribers. I don't get it. So what is your experience with that kind of situation?
Well, look, YouTube, as opposed to some of the other platforms, the big game is tag, title, and thumbnail. So if you don't have an appeasing/appealing thumbnail and a title that's interesting to go along with it, then people are likely not going to click on your video, despite it maybe being a really interesting, detailed, nuanced video. It could be well done. It could be, the production could be great, well written, and everything like that. Well, great lighting, a good set. But yeah, if you don't, like I said, if you don't have the title and the thumbnail, then nobody's going to click on it. As opposed to like TikTok, reaching a For You page on TikTok doesn't really necessarily need you to have a title and a thumbnail. So YouTube is a different ball game, but it's worth it because I heard a stat the other day about, the accumulated watch hours that people view on YouTube are more than a lot of what we would think of traditional TV channels. So YouTube's definitely worth the extra effort.
So do you think it's an algorithm issue that actually YouTube is controlling the algorithm, or do you think it's that the algorithm has been thrown out and basically just larger accounts can buy more ad space now, and that boosts up their larger account?
No, I mean, look, YouTube is in the business of keeping people on the app or on the website. And so if they feel like a certain video or a certain creator is going to keep people engaged, then they will just pump out that creator or video. And so once YouTube and the algorithm figures out that they can use you or sell you to get people's attention, then they will do that. So it's in their best interest to sell. I don't want to say their best people, because that's not the case. I don't think the creators with the most money or the most views are the best. But with that being said, the ones who can keep your eyeballs on the screen, yeah, YouTube will show them much more likely than others who may not. So, I've been contemplating lately trying to make longer videos, longer than 20 minutes. I usually don't go over 20 minutes on my YouTube channel. I've been thinking about going over 20 minutes just to hopefully catch the algorithm again. The few times I've done it, like I said, it's definitely been worth it. But, it's like we're at the mercy of this seeming God called the algorithm. So anything we can do to appease it is good.
Well, I used to think that, but I have some anecdotal evidence. It's purely anecdotal. But I used to have another channel. I lost the password. I can't figure out what it is, and I can't recover it. But it was just my stupid passion for large 6x6 military trucks, right? And I happened to own one, and it would get like 36,000 views on nothing with just like a title like "In the Mud," and it's like, I'm like, it's just me, just fooling around. I was like, just wanted to see what would happen. And I just think it was the novelty of YouTube at first that drove so much of the viewing.
Yeah, look, there's yeah, there's something to that. But like, so literally, on my computer right here, there is a video, 10 hours of paint driving, 10 hours of paint drying with 1.6 million views.
Yeah, those are things I can't fathom how those are getting views as much as they are.
It is, yeah, 10 hours and 1 second of paint drying. It's not like the thumbnail is great and the title is very specific and doesn't need details, kind of like what it is. But 1.6 million views, and the video is 5 years long. So if you can get back to your truck making videos or find that password, I would encourage you to do it, because apparently you found some niche that is really interesting to people.
Yeah, because I had some with like 200,000 views.
Yeah, you found a niche that was really interesting to people. It could have been,
I don't know.
Ex-military. It could be 8-year-olds. I don't know, but whatever.
Oh, come on, that hurts. You're saying that the deep down inside that it's true. I'm an 8-year-old.
If you can tap into gaining access to kids and their interests in a safe, considerate way, then yeah, I would do that on YouTube, because a lot of kids are on YouTube, but that's where they get that's their primary entertainment. So yeah, if you're showing off cool trucks, absolutely. Yeah, just
I just could never figure out why some of them took off so big. I mean, blew up. I was like, wow. I was like, it's just me driving around in a circle someplace, But it worked. And so I was wondering, from that anecdotal evidence, I mean, but the political stuff seems to be a much different spectrum, right?
Yeah, I mean, so my time with TYT, I would get, and not just me, but a number of us would get a lot more views when it was election time or midterm time or something like that. That's when people were more eager to tune in to election cycles or political cycles. But there were down and dead periods where it seemed like people didn't want to hear anything about news, or they were tired of it, or like, things got too political from time to time. And so, yeah, there were definitely highs and lows throughout the year.
Oh, I definitely agree with that. I mean, it has a specific peak and valley, kind of pattern to it, almost anything, except for like the raw entertainment. Like, I guess the paint drying, it's so benign that it's just straight arc to 10 million. But what do you think is the success system that promotes certain of these political commentators to like ultra status? I mean, I can't figure out why Charlie Kirk is so famous, or what's the other guy? Oh God, he used to be on TYT and then he switched.
Jimmy Dore?
No, well, yeah, Jimmy Dore is one. Jimmy Dore, I mean, he's gone full on MAGA.
Are you talking about Hassan Piker?
No, not Hassan Piker. He's still pretty, with his cousin basically in the middle. No, it was the other one. It was Rubin. What's his name? Rubin? Oh God, I can see his face.
Oh, Dave Rubin. Dave
Rubin, yes.
Well, look. I'm not going to say the Charlie Kirks and Dave Rubins of the world aren't smart. I will say that what they bring to the table, you don't have to necessarily be well read. You don't have to be prepared or anything like that. They give a certain fervor to the country, which is conservative viewpoints, and they can pretend that like they're being pushed asunder or censored. That's definitely not the case at all.
No, it's not, because I mean, I see in my like videos that they try and push to me, they're all conservative videos. It's like, and I can't figure out how this algorithm is working, right? I mean, because I don't watch them ever, and yet I get like 5 or 6 videos of Charlie Kirk, Jimmy Dore, Alex Jones. Not through Alex Jones, but Alex Jones, like somebody else talking about Alex Jones. So that's how he's staying on here and staying, relevant.
I mean, yeah. And so, they, what they sell is, look, when I was looking for I'll put it to you this way. When I was looking for a job in media and broadcasting, and I still technically am, I can tell you right now that there are some conservative platforms that are always hiring because they're doing so well. That's how I see it. They're doing so well and they're always hiring. One being the Daily Wire. I know for a fact that their headquarters, I think they might be in Nashville
They're
because
in Nashville now.
yeah,
He got
because scrolling through
COVID pushed him out of LA. He had a whole big shtick about how he was moving, he was being persecuted in LA, and Shapiro had to run to the free state of Nashville.
It's amazing how they don't see themselves as victim mentality latent people. But yeah, I regularly see job openings for Fox News and the Daily Wire. So something's working for them.
Well, I was just getting at the point that, it just seems to me that those are the ones that the algorithm really seems to favor, because I mean, I'm looking up guys like David Harvey, true Marxist, and all of a sudden I get five for every David Harvey video in my thing. There's like 5 Charlie Kirks. It's like, okay, well, something's up here.
Well, yeah, as much as they cry about leftists being socialists and Marxists, there's not a hunger for that by way of content creation or content viewing. I mean, honestly, a number of most Americans have no idea what socialism or Marxism actually is. It's one of those things where it's become a word that you kind of just say, a buzzword where you throw it out there for stuff you generally don't like woke. Mm-hmm. Socialism, Marxism, wokeness, it's all like, I don't like that, so it is socialism, Marxism, wokeness. And so, yeah, you're not going to see any popular, true Marxists making content in America, because who's yearning for that here?
Well, I am, and I'm trying to make that kind of content actually. But I mean, that was kind of my point. You just hit it right on the head. I want, that what we're seeing a lot of these, larger independent, what I call so-called independent, because basically they're just small businesses that want to be large producers of content eventually. They all want to be the Daily Wire at the end of the day. And they're using all the same models. They're using the same kind of, outsourcing a lot of their content creation to guys like you, because it gives them a really good way of getting a vast amount of content creation for a very small amount of money, really.
I mean, yeah. So, it's better / easier to hire contract work than actually bring people on staff, because then you're going to have to pay for healthcare and stuff like that. And so it's a good business model if you want to, honestly, use people. So
yeah, I mean, that's what I was getting at, is that, and it's very interesting for me to watch these guys come out on the air and say, oh, well, we're so vastly different than, well, like think of what Breaking Point says all the time. Screw the corporate media. We're just 2 people in a desk. And then you find out, if you read their article, which I have right here, they're popular, but they got a whole bunch of people, right? I mean, and basically they just didn't want to deal with the staff anymore at the Hill. They were like, let's cut out the middle guys, and we'll fund it.
Well, so if I can use a nerdy example right quick, even though I don't like, my kids will probably be like, you don't know much about Star Wars, but I do know this. When George Lucas started out making Star Wars movies and everything like that, he had to make it on his own, because he couldn't really necessarily rely on bigger entities to help him out. So then Lucasfilm comes along, and then it becomes the very thing that he was trying to go against in the beginning. It's a big, giant corporate entity. It didn't start off that way, but it became that. And I see the same thing with some of these smaller media companies, to where, they might have started off independent to kind of stick it to the mainstream media. One day, if they have enough success, they will be mainstream media. I mean, look, I will say this: Fox News always talks about mainstream media, but I think 6 of their shows get the highest earnings and ratings on cable news. So how are they not mainstream media?
Oh, they're completely mainstream media. I mean,
absolutely,
that's the great illusion, right? I mean, that's what I'm getting at here, is that we have all these smaller independent companies that are coming up, trying to be mainstream, and using the same tactics, because they're a business, and they can't not use the same tactics if they want to stay in business. It's only the crazy Marxist like me that says, well, maybe we should create a collective, and obviously we're gonna have a day job to fund it for a while, but then we'll get independent media.
Yeah, I see. I have a day job right now, so which impacts content creation for the time being, but it's what's necessary, so we're good.
Yeah. So what kind of content do you like to produce mostly?
Oddly enough, I don't really like talking about politics specifically. I like to talk about what politics touches. So, which it touches everything, sure, but I'd rather talk about like a policy rather than a politician. But of course, if you talk about a policy, you need to bring up who introduced the bill. So I remember seeing on TikTok one time where a content creator was like, what is something you can wake up, no preparation, and talk about for an hour straight? And my answer was gun crime, violent crime, and policies that go along with it. Like for a while, I could just easily wake up and talk about it with no preparation. Just, okay, 1 hour. So I like to talk about like how all those things intersect. I literally just uploaded a video last night talking about like relationships and stuff like that and mismatched couples. And I thought it was interesting. I don't think my audience likes it, actually, just looking at the numbers, but that's fine. I like talking about it, so I'm going to talk about it because I thought it was a really interesting thing based off like relationships and stuff like that, like how people end up together and then what that looks like. But at the same time, what goes along with that is also like perception.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing that we use for politics, just in a different way. So I think two of my favorite videos, and possibly because I worked with them so hard, and it took a lot of time. I talked about the dynamic of Asian American success versus the plight of Black people. I made two videos.
I watched that video.
Yeah, I made two videos combating that because they were seemingly things that people on the right think that like we cannot contend with, and like, no, yes, we can. Like, we know the history of what led to these ideas, and so but as you were alluding to earlier, it's not like those videos of mine, even though I like them so much, I think they were well done, they don't have the most views on my channel, so that's just how it goes. But I think pound for pound, video for video, those are probably two of my best.
Yeah, it's usually the one you feel the best about is usually the one that gets like the lowest ratings.
Correct. Absolutely.
And it's the one that you don't expect. You're like, that one I didn't do so well on, and everything went off the rails. Everyone's like, oh, I love that. I mean, you think, well, they must love watching a train wreck then.
Yeah, I even at TYT, the two videos that got the most views was there for me. When I turned them in, I was just like, oh, here's this video. Like, I hope it does well. And then, you look up, you're like, oh, wow, like they did really well. And then you try to repeat that formula and it never works again.
No, I mean, and that may be the problem, right, with the algorithm, right? Because like television has a specific formula. You know that you're going to watch the bloodiest story in the front, in the middle of the newscast, because they keep on alluding to that. And then they're going to put the weather, and then they're going to tell you that they got some kind of amazing update on some story, and that's going to be what caps it all off so that you stick around for the last 30 minutes.
Yeah. And it definitely works for them. I mean, that's something I've talked about before where, there was this idea that news doesn't talk about black on black crime. And I'm like,
news loves black on black crime.
Oh my gosh, they love it so much.
It's ridiculous.
So it's built into the structure that you were just saying. So where you can start off the newscast with like some egregious thing happening, not even in your community, but like maybe adjacent to it or near it somehow. And that captivates people. It's like, well, what happened? What's going on? And so, yeah, it's built right into the structure of things. So when people try to say or propagate that's not happening, it's definitely happening. And that was the video that I remember making that video. It was easy to find data in a study suggesting that, like, yes, black criminals on the news are definitely overrepresented. Not really hard to see that. So that was an easy video, actually.
I live in a pretty white section of New York State. I live in upstate New York, in between the capital and New York City.
Okay.
So it's the white hinterland.
Yeah.
And so, but if you go on but you will see at least 3 black criminal cases all the time on the news, compared to like maybe 1 or 2 white a week. Now it's 3 a night of that to 1 or 2 white guys a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people say, oh, no. I'm like, you counted. I've counted it. It's crazy how high it is.
Absolutely. And then, you go along with that with the some of the updates from previous stories. So even if we are in the news for something that just happened, it's like updates from previous nights. And so it's a reoccurring thing.
Or the local news, especially since we got Sinclair here, Sinclair Network.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They like to peel from their so like they'll take the crimes from Arizona and they'll put them here in their so-called world review, and they're like, yeah, that's definitely a problem. And you see it here online too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I just found some guy on Twitter who had a whole bunch of videos of cops, assaulting black people. Right? I mean, supposedly you're not supposed to have any of those violent content videos on Twitter.
Well,
and this guy had about 12 of them in like the last hour.
Look, there's supposedly not a lot of stuff on Twitter that we definitely do see. It's definitely there. But when Elon Musk is leading things and people are believing in him, then you would rather take what he says is happening versus what's actually happening.
But I'm just saying that also drives the whole media content of the independent world,
Yeah.
The way he's affecting Twitter, right? He's perpetuating all of these myths that, are pushing those more conservative content creators to the top.
And all the while pretending to be either moderate or centrist. Yeah. So, which someone like him, I don't understand why he won't just come out and say what his political leaning actually is. Like there's not going to be any impact to his life whatsoever.
I don't know. I mean, I think the cult of personality has built himself up as being this, guru of all things, so he can't really be pinned down on anything. But I mean, we know what he is. He's a racist. That's what he is. He's just a flat out rich racist. And we shouldn't be that really surprised because he came from South Africa during apartheid, and that was pretty much ingrained in them. By the time they were 7, they were all pretty.
Yeah.
They bought into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think another thing that he's done on Twitter is he's proven to a number of people that like CEO worth has definitely declined with his presence on Twitter, because this man will respond all day and night on Twitter to stuff that he's not even tagged in. Like he's not even mentioned in something and he's responding and replying all day and night. And so if he's the CEO of several companies, but he's replying and tweeting on one of his platforms, then.
Well, look, it's the same thing that Trump did. It's like the same personality. I mean, he had to respond and get a one-up on anybody because that's who they are. I mean, at the end of the day, they don't really care about the company. They care about the what was I say? The attention it gives them. We have a second person that I invited. He came in a little late. You might know him, Chris Richards of the Eclectic Radical.
Oh no, but nice to meet Chris.
Here he is. Hi, Chris.
Pleasure to meet you. Hey, Connor. Nice to be here.
So we were talking about Elon Musk and how he's been destroying Twitter with his racist diatribes at 3 a.m.
I'm so mad. I mean, even beyond the racist diatribes, he's changed the algorithm in such a way that people don't click our links anymore. And people see our links less. And I'm getting massively less traffic from Twitter than I used to. It used to be I tweet something out and I have 100 people look at it, even if they didn't all engage with it. And now it seems like it's less engagement and less people seeing it.
It does. What do you think, Jeff?
I mean, yeah. Are you Twitter blue?
No.
No.
I just can't. I can't.
I'm not giving him my money. I refuse.
Of course not. Then so then he's not going to promote or sell or pin up whatever you have to say. And like we can kind of see the other side of that, so where there are Twitter blue people who are getting views, but they're not getting engagement or likes or replies or anything like that, because it's not like they're interesting, but we see their tweets more often because they're Twitter blue. So
yeah,
that is true.
That is
but
true.
I mean, but a whole lot of but even the big accounts, I still think that have a massive following, they're still getting much better results.
I think it depends on whether or not your what you're doing fits the new algorithm.
True. I don't see
Dr. Carlson seems to be doing fine, but then
he's Twitter gold though. He went up another level.
Well, that's the organizational account, isn't it? The gold one.
I guess so.
So I guess he's the Tucker organization.
Soon, I think he'll be Tucker Platinum. And that's when you really get up there, He and what is it, Mr. Beast? They're trying to get on over there at Twitter now.
Yeah. No, they're trying to get Mr. Beast, and I think they're trying to get Don Lemon as well.
Okay, that must be so that he can deny that he's a racist and then call racist things to Don Lemon all night long.
Don Lemon is a name, so you want to get names. I think you're probably right in that it doesn't hurt that Don Lemon is someone who he can point to and say, "See, I'm not racist." But I think it comes down to, is somebody a name and is there a commercial demand for them?
But is there a commercial demand for Don Lemon? He's not.
That's a good point.
Didn't he get fired from CNN for not being commercially viable?
Well, was it for not being commercially viable, or was it because he offended somebody?
I think it was a little bit of both.
I mean, because if you want to be really technical, the whole cable news model has not been commercially viable since
competition became a part of it.
Yeah, since Fox and CNN and MSNBC all started competing. Yeah, it was great when it was. I mean, Ted Turner seemed to be doing great when it was just him.
Amazing how monopolies work that way. That's why he got out of it. He saw the writing on the wall and said, "Hell, I'm out."
Well, he sold up. It was one of those things where, by no longer being the boss of his little empire, he became one of the most important people in the much bigger Time Warner empire, which sadly appears since to have been balkanized into pieces of other people's empires.
That's very true. So we were discussing, Chris, how do you think the algorithm has been treating your videos on YouTube?
YouTube seems to be doing okay. YouTube has been favoring commercial content over independent content for a little longer than Twitter has been sort of shadow banning creator content that doesn't have a blue check associated with it. At the same time, people keep subscribing to YouTube reasonably often. People keep watching. While more of my views come from Twitter than YouTube, I've been getting a jump in YouTube views on each video for the last few weeks.
Yeah, you see, I do better on Substack with my podcast. It gets way more views than Twitter or anywhere else if I put it. And I just don't understand what's going on there. Maybe because I've been
the majority of my live stream views appear to come from the Twitter broadcast of the live stream.
Okay.
But I get more, but I don't know how long those people are watching. I just know that, 900 people watched it.
That's another thing. You got, YouTube's really good to tell you how long your segments are and where they stopped watching, what they started to really engage with.
But I know 900 people watch it on Twitter as opposed to if it's a good 35 to 60 people on YouTube. So there's a difference.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting on YouTube, and it's in the doldrums. And I mean, I'm a little disappointed because my stupid truck used to get more views, like radically more views, and I can't figure that out. It's just a damn truck. Don't watch it, please. Watch this. This is intelligent. That's me being a fool. But I mean, like, I can't fight it. Like, 500,000 views on one.
Yeah, I don't know.
And then they took it off for a complaint because I used some music that was supposed to be free, but it wasn't. But I guess it lost its so-called free thing. So they're like, copyright infringement. That's another thing they've been using, copyright infringement, a lot to suppress smaller.
Yeah, because if I clip something from the news, then YouTube will nail me for infringing the news's copyright, which sort of seems defeating the purpose of the news existing if everybody can't just clip from it. Are you telling me that Sean Hannity is paying MSNBC every time he clips to make fun of, say, Rachel Maddow or somebody?
No. I mean, they're using the free and fair clause in the copyright law.
Yeah, that's
for
what
commentary. What about you think about that?
I was going to say that when I was with TYT doing contract work, we were never allowed to use local news station coverage.
Really?
So, yeah, we could use MSNBC most of the time, Fox News most of the time, CNN most of the time. But if it was local news, don't do it. Not even close.
I wonder why.
You know what? They explained it when it first came up. I don't remember what they said. I just got it in my mind. All right, don't do that. And so I just kept it moving.
Well, so it's like if it's on Fox News, it's owned by Fox. And Fox is who they're going to deal with. And they probably have a relationship with Fox on some level. Same with MSNBC, maybe CNN. But with the local news, you've got like 500 different people who might own it. Everybody from the Sinclair media empire to Joe Blow, who's always owned the TV station in that town.
Well, that's a big problem. The whole fact when Clinton removed the monopoly thing from owning radio stations and TV stations was just a terrible idea. You should only be able to own 6. I'm sorry. You don't need iHeartRadio.
iHeartRadio doesn't bother me. It's iHeartMedia that
iHeartMedia is a problem. I mean, what about there's literally a radio company here. I mean, it's nationwide, Cumulus, right? But they own like 6 radio stations, and they own 2 radio stations in my area that have enough overlap that if you switch between them, you can hear the same song back to back.
I don't know if you know it. Do you know who iHeartRadio is?
Isn't it the guy that's Isn't it? No, maybe that's the other one.
So
I thought iHeartRadio was
back in the old days of talk radio. There used to be a company called Clear Channel.
Yeah, I know that.
Clear Channel was the company that all the right-wing talk show hosts had their contracts with and who syndicated their shows. Mm-hmm. They also owned a bunch of radio stations. And if Clear Channel owned your radio station, that means that Clear Channel's content would get syndicated on your radio station, and some of your radio station's content might become syndicated content on Clear Channel. Clear Channel is iHeartMedia.
Yeah, I thought they merged with
Clear
someone.
Clear Channel people merged with the iHeartRadio app people, and Clear Channel became iHeartMedia.
Oh, I knew that part, but I mean, there's a who owns that? I'll have to look that up in a second. There's one person who's like the
worst people.
Who's like the CEO is like married to a Star Trek.
I believe it.
I don't think I know who that is.
Well, I guess we'll soldier on with Chris here because our friend Jeff has to exit in a minute.
In a few minutes, yes. I still got a few more minutes. Thank you.
Oh, I didn't know. That's fine. So what I was saying to you is, so I was curious about your you feel that? Where do you feel that the whole thing is going with the independent media? Do you think they're all going to be swallowed up by the larger corporations that are forming now, and what we're going to see is kind of like a syndication thing, like an iHeartRadio deal?
That's a good question. No, you go ahead. You go ahead first.
Bob Pittman is the CEO of iHeartMedia.
Maybe it's one of the other ones. Oh, well, I always mix it up. So, because that's where I see it going personally. I see these, like, for example, TYT has like the Majority Report underneath it, and it has all these other little shows. And I see them buying up other companies, getting other little guys that are big, have a big enough following to glob on and become, they're syndicated.
I can only say what I've seen from my outside view, looking at it from the floor up, as somebody completely independent who's never been involved with anybody bigger, which is to say, it looks like you've got Sharks and Ramoras, and you have people with an audience who mostly suck and engage in a lot of very, I'm going to use a word from professional wrestling, a lot of very kayfabe beefs with each other. And
I don't know what that means, but it doesn't
beefs,
sound good.
Those kayfabe is a pro wrestling term for fake. Mm-hmm. Kayfabe refers to all the storylines that you used to be able to suspend disbelief for.
It's a story? No.
Yes, it's a story. But yeah, so that kayfabe refers to all the stuff that you suspend disbelief for when watching professional wrestling. Like the idea that Hulk Hogan really beat Andre the Giant at WrestleMania.
Another childhood fantasy that I never had.
They used to do what they called shooting matches in these big events where people would actually wrestle to see who would win. But WrestleMania was such a big deal and Hulk Hogan was such a big investment that they scripted it and made it a job for Andre instead of a shooting match. And that was the end of this, the possibility to suspend disbelief in pro wrestling. Kayfabe didn't completely go out the window until years later, but that was the beginning of the end, which is hilarious because that was when Vincent McMahon really started to make lots and lots of money too. But it was the beginning of the end.
So what you're saying is that what we're going to see is more of these fake, tabloid-like interactions between.
Let's say I wanted to get on Jimmy Dore's show. If I wanted to get on Jimmy Dore's show, the best way for me to get on Jimmy Dore's show would be to do a bunch of clips on Jimmy Dore on my show, talking about how Jimmy Dore is right and bashing someone Jimmy Dore doesn't like. And then I might end up on Jimmy Dore's show. And then I'm going to be able to share audiences with Jimmy Dore. But I'm also going to be tied to whatever Jimmy Dore is saying, whether I want to be or not. Now, that's why I've never been involved with any of the bigger fish, because I haven't ever wanted to be in a position of having to defend somebody I didn't want to defend for any reason other than I really did agree with them. Because one thing I can say as my brand is I've disagreed with anyone I really disagree with and agree with anyone I really agree with, regardless of whether they're quote unquote on my side or not. But that confuses fans who want to divvy everything up into teams.
Well, that is the problem with the internet right now, is that it has become kind of a team operation, team Vanguard, team Breaking Points, team Majority Report, et cetera, and then that balkanization has created these riffs that just play out to, as you say, nonsensical, fodder
And I mentioned Jimmy Dore on purpose because the first big kayfabe beef to drive viewers was Jimmy Dore and Michael Brooks.
You think that was fake?
I absolutely think that was fake. Because
I don't think it was fake.
Michael Brooks is too smart to really think people were stupid for not voting Democrat. He chose to commit to that character because that was what he had to do for the money. But he was too smart to really believe some of the stuff he was saying. I just give him too much credit.
I think the guy just didn't like. I think they really didn't like each other, and they took every opportunity to find something not to
That's
like each
fair
other.
too. They all worked together just happily for years, though.
I've gone back through some of the footage because I'm not a big Michael Brooks fan, and I was looking for stuff that just made absolutely no sense. And they seem to hate each other from the beginning.
That's fair. That's fair.
What do you think, Jeff? I mean, that's what I think. I think that was an honest hatred right there. I mean, I think they said, nope, we don't like each other, and we're not going to play nice.
I can see, honestly, I can't believe I'm about to say this. I can see both. I can see both happening. I didn't know or talk to either of them, and I definitely didn't watch either. But from the things I've heard, yeah, that could very well be a thing to where even, let's say, here's a perfect marriage of the two. Let's say they didn't really hate each other. They may have disliked each other, or they had a disagreement. But you could play it up a little bit for the sake of like making it interesting. Sure. Like, yeah.
Well, They obviously disagree. Jimmy Dore very clearly doesn't believe you should vote for Democrats no matter what, and Michael Brooks claimed to believe that you had to.
Yeah, there was a whole lot of stuff I've never really understood. I've never understood the fake arguments they had with what was his name, Pac-Man. They went off on a couple of years of trying to say that he was stealing their viewers there, but that really wasn't where I was getting at with this. I mean, I do believe that that's the tabloid stuff that is driving a lot of the content now. I was more interested in where the content you think is going to really go when these larger companies coalesce and buy up all the smaller ones.
Well, so okay, here's my perspective, because I was just looking at my YouTube analytics earlier today. Actually, I'm kind of peeking at them right now. So YouTube tells me what channels my audience watches in the last 28 days. And I'm going to give you a few of the names in which I'm like, wow, like, what the heck? How am I? We're not even doing the same thing. The David Pakman Show, The Majority Report with Sam Cedar, Fair and Balanced, Jesse Dolomar, The Ring of Fire, Luke Beasley. It goes on from there. And so we don't really do and clearly there's Rebel HQ, The Damage Report, The Young Turks, TYT Sport, like that's on there too because of my history. But a lot of the people at his name, we don't really do the same things. And so what I think happened is just like this cross-pollination between me working at TYT and doing those things with the people also watching them. And so then my name recognition and my face comes along with whatever was going on over there. But again, we don't do the same things or even similar things, I guess. And I don't want to talk about news daily. That does not interest me whatsoever. But they do. But apparently people who watch me watch them.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting how some of that stuff pops up sometimes. It is true, because I was doing this thing on Substack just for fun, and at that point in Substack, I had like a significantly high concentration of subscribers in Missouri, and I'm like, well, what is it about me that would sell in Missouri anywhere else?
I get Michigan. I don't know why. Michigan seems to like me a lot.
I have friends in Michigan, so that makes sense. That would make sense.
I don't know anybody in Michigan offhand.
I'm a pretty outspoken Buckeye, so I don't think I got
Ohio.
Yeah,
I lived in Louisville, which is kind of underneath Michigan. When I talk about it every once in a while.
I put my Buckeye status out all the time, so I don't think I have too many viewers in Michigan, although they do reach out from time to time.
I would figure New York, because I like to talk about New York. I mean, it's local. It's what I know. It's where I am. And yeah, still Michigan. It's probably all those Michigan militia people following me, trying to get rid of me.
Well,
gotta have fans, even if they're negative ones.
I mean, hate watchers are people who are going to give you devoted clicks no matter what.
I would sure hope so. I'd pay for some good hate watchers, actually.
Some people do.
They're dependable. You know what you're going to get from them. A lot of negative comments, a lot of driving things,
Yeah.
Hold on for a second. I'll be right back.
Okay.
I definitely. So as far as content, and I mean, I think there are some things that aren't going to get bought up. I mean, nobody's going to come by me.
I don't know. If you get enough viewers, I think they are. I think that's where it's going.
Yeah, but I don't know that I'm ever going to get enough viewers for anyone to care to buy me. That's
Probably not. Probably not. I mean, let's be honest. If you're honest and you talk to people about serious topics, the odds of you getting viewers is probably not as good as we.
But being honest and talking to people about serious topics is what I want to do. So that's the problem.
Don't I know it? You know, I mean, I don't understand what is the draw about the tabloid-like content.
I know why people watch it. I mean, a certain amount of tabloid content is fun. There was a guy whose show was basically just, I can't remember what the name of his show was anymore. I wish I could, but basically his show was just a gossip column about what all the other progressive YouTube hosts were doing.
Oh, I know that guy. Yeah, he's Alex Suarez, not Alex Suarez, Alex something or other.
I don't remember his name. It's the progressive something.
Yeah, he's like a big, like all the big names are like fans of him because they watch him because he makes fun of the people that they don't like.
Yes, but he also makes fun of them. So
not he used to. He used to until like people like all the bigger names started to get on his show and be like, "Oh, I love this guy. He's like such a guilty pleasure."
Sorry, my wife was leaving. That's why I was distracted, and I could have sworn that her backing out of the garage, she took out her side mirror because she's done it before. Don't tell her I said that, but it's a thing. So I thought I heard that, but that's not what was going on.
Everybody's taking out a side mirror.
I haven't because I don't drive, but that's a whole nother story.
Well, we're good. So that's why I was distracted earlier. I'm like, wait, what? Where are you going? What happened? But no, we're good.
Okay, that's fine. What I was going to say is, so yeah, I mean, I think the tabloid aspect is really way too strong in independent media right now.
I think that people are going to imitate what they think will bring in viewers. Now, I do what I do because I want to give people an alternative to all the talking head Sunday shows that'll be about something actually useful and edifying.
I agree with that.
But you know, if what somebody wants to do is do their version of Access Hollywood, then that's what they're going to do, and they'll probably be more successful at it than I will, because apparently not all that many people really want an alternative to the talking head Sunday shows. They're happy, but I'm going to keep doing it because what else am I going to do on Sunday morning? It's either do that or sleep in.
I can't sleep in anymore, so I would definitely do what you're doing. That's the big problem, though. I mean, and we're seeing it over and over and over again. And I think that's what's really pushing so much of our content right now on the left is that it's, you know, we're oversaturated with negative news topics. Nothing seems to work, right? I mean, when it was under Bernie, it was winning. You felt like you were winning and something was moving forwards. And now, you know, it's not really, it feels like it's stagnating again. And I think people want that, you know.
So I'm going to be counterintuitive.
Okay.
I'm going to go against the grain.
Go against the grain.
I'm going to say I see a lot of good news, believe it or not. And I'm going to say that the good news I see is related to the worst possible news in the media right now. But do you remember how when Bernie was running for president, he was talking about tying foreign aid to Israel directly to Israel's human rights behaviors and denying aid based on how Israel treats Palestinians? So we're hearing lots of people who are not Bernie talk about linking these things now in the media, We're talking about people like David Ignatius, who would never say anything good about Bernie Sanders ever if you paid him. David Ignatius saying we really need to start seeing the White House and the Congress link aid to Israel with how they treat the Palestinians. And we need to use that leverage. And so now you've got something that was everybody was saying was silly in the 2020 primaries. That's now a very normal thing in the ordinary foreign policy media circles that hated it in 2020. And all that changed was Benjamin Netanyahu getting back into power and making them look bad.
I will say, going back to when Bernie was running, I think some of the bad news at that time was, oh, crap, the Democrats really aren't going to give him a chance, are they? They're going to lean toward Biden. I do remember thinking that from time to time. Like, yeah, that's. But yeah, I mean, it's. There's a lot of people who are vehemently against the IDF in this current what's being deemed a war against Gazans and Palestinians, and I'm glad there are a lot more voices, independent voices, which kind of lends itself to what we're talking about.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, that's great. So that's really good. And honestly, Bernie has said something within the last 2 months about this whole situation that I wasn't a fan of, and I was deeply disappointed by. So that's kind of part of it.
True. I mean, there's definitely Bernie's let us down over the last couple of years. He had a couple of moments where he could have really pulled out the stops and really put pressure in Congress on things that he just didn't do.
Well, let's be totally fair. And the big knock on Bernie was always that he was kind of a Zionist.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there was always that aspect of Bernie who was the dude who had stayed in the kibbutz and really looked up to David Ben-Gurion when he was younger. And I mean, that makes people who they are. You can't take that out of who somebody is. And it's worth noting that that the idea of blowing up Palestinian women and children started in 1947 in August, when the Haganah blew up a farmhouse that belonged to an orange farmer named Abu Laban and killed 6 of his grandkids, along with 12 people total, but 6 of his grandkids and his wife.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
that was August of 1947, so that's 3 months before the official start of the war. But that's how long killing the women and children has been going on. And people don't want to link. People don't want to link the killing of the killing of civilians and the massacres with the parts of Israeli history that they associate with in a positive way out of some sort of false nostalgia.
Yeah, that's very true. But I mean, if we swing it back to the media side, we're seeing that the independent media is making more of those links now than they had been. And they're one of the few resources out there that will report. Now, of course, some of it's hijacked by all kinds of nutty.
And to give them credit, let's remember that Mehdi Hasan was countering the narrative well enough that MSNBC took his show away.
Well, I mean, I guess that comes down to did he offend someone or did he lose ratings numbers question, right? Or was it a question of both?
I don't know that you're going to. I mean, so you have to understand that when Mehdi Hasan came to work for MSNBC, he was still a Muslim progressive who had a record of being aggressively pro-Palestine and had lost jobs because of it before. So it wasn't like there was some. I mean, I always assumed that there was going to be an expectation he would conform, and that eventually he would either conform or get fired. But
who did he replace?
Who did Mehdi Hasan replace? That's complicated.
No, he replaced that. Not really, because he filled in for the guy. He replaced the guy that made those horrible statements about, and they were stupid statements.
So
about what's her name, Sarah Palin, when she went all crazy, and he said what she was making all those statements about Muslims in 2008. And he had the 4 o'clock show just before Rachel Maddow had the 5 o'clock show.
Oh, well, the 4 o'clock show. So Joy Reid has the 4 o'clock show. She replaced Chris Matthews, he had Hardball, which was the 4 o'clock show on MSNBC forever.
Yes, it was.
He lost his job because of his very weird comments about being afraid of basically comparing Bernie Sanders fans to stormtroopers and not Star Wars stormtroopers.
Well, he had 2 of them. He had the first primary, the first part of the primary. He was going to be shot in Central Park.
Yeah,
and then he said that wasn't quite good enough. Yeah, there's a great clip of it I have somewhere of him. He's like, the Bernie Sanders people are the kind of people that take people like me out in the middle of Central Park and we get shot. And everyone's looking at him like, "Oh God, what the hell?" do you say to that?
But no, then he called Bernie Sanders voters brown
Nazis.
Shirts.
Then he said they were Nazis invading Paris in Vegas, and that was it. I mean, they were like, "Yep, well, it was okay if you compared him to Castro. That was fine."
His good friends Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough still have him on their show fairly frequently as a guest.
He's been on Breaking Points now.
Now that I didn't know.
Yeah, he's slumming it on the internet world now, like Bill O'Reilly.
Tucker on X.
Tucker on X, who was supposed to destroy the world with his 85 million views in 30 seconds. It turns out that's all it was ever, 85 views in 30 seconds, and everyone says, "Well, I've seen that show before. It was the same as last night's."
Isn't it true that on Twitter, if your video is viewed for 2 seconds, that counts as a view?
I think so.
I'd have to go in and actually look at the.
They had for a long time. They had a ridiculously short view.
It's not very long, but they have to actually pay attention. I think it's like 20 or 30 seconds now.
Yeah, they can't scroll up and down for a certain amount of period.
Yeah. Because there's a difference between them getting an impression of the tweet and actually counting as a view on the video.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, back in the day, it was 30 seconds or less for YouTube.
I believe it used to just be they counted every impression on a tweet with a video in it as a view of the video, though I could be wrong.
I remember back when YouTube used to count 10 seconds as a view.
Yeah.
11 or 12 years ago. They were like, "Yep, that's a view." And that's how
I just hope the people who watch my show for 30 minutes are picking the best 30 minutes every Sunday.
But they're all such good 30 minutes. It's hard to choose. That's what I like to say.
It's true.
I mean, yeah, but, getting back to that, I mean, so we've seen the fall of those guys, and all of those guys have now come down to podcasts. I mean, look, Megyn Kelly's got a massive podcast for some unknown reason.
Well, I mean, it's because she made herself persona non grata on the conservative side by standing up to bosses. And I don't care that it was her sticking with her friend. It doesn't matter. You stand up to the boss in even a small way. That's a big deal to the boss. And that's why she hasn't gotten a big job in conservative media, because Fox News is telling everybody else in conservative media, you don't want her to work for you. And then she tried to do regular liberal media, but the problem with that is she's still really, really, really a fascist.
Wasn't she complaining like 2 years ago about their kids' school being too liberal down in New York City? There was some kind of crazy, I think they were going to have some kind of, diversity class, and that was just way too much for her. She was like, I pay good money for this Catholic school.
Well, that's the whole thing. Megyn Kelly buys into the whole anti-white racism grievance stuff. And if somebody buys into anti-white grievance stuff, that's a red flag. I'm sorry.
Oh, come on.
Because let's look at it. I mean, on a basic level of humanity, and I say this as a white person, on a basic level of humanity, if you aren't anti-white, what the fuck is wrong with you? So, but that's just on a basic level of humanity, and that's just based on how people have been running things for the past few years.
Well,
and by the past few years, I mean recorded Western history.
It's not a good look. We definitely don't have a good look.
You have to understand what whiteness is, and you have to understand who the people who thought whiteness up were. So originally, the Pope says Spain and Portugal each get half of the heathen world, and it's their job to make the world Christian. Spain, you go west and make the world Christian. Portugal, you go east and make the world Christian. And that was the original excuse for colonialism, the Pope divvying the world up into two halves for Spain and Portugal to each make their half Christian. And the conquistadors, you got to give them credit. They really worked hard on making their half of the world Christian, and it looks like it paid off, for good or ill.
That's right.
I said real quick before I go, somebody in my comment section had a problem with me saying in one of my videos that white people invented race. And so I just set the names Carlos Linnaeus and Johann Blumenbach to them.
Yes.
And, they acted like they didn't understand what I was saying. So then I threw out Immanuel Kant. And, I don't understand what they're arguing against. Like, Europeans invented race. Like, what?
They want to believe race is real. See, this is the thing. There is no such thing as a white country or a white culture or a white language. Whiteness is this weird sort of pan-Germanism, because let's remember the English and the French are also Germans. The three major defining Western European countries, the English, the French, and the Germans, are all the Germans if you go back far enough in history.
Some of the Italians, the modern Italians, must
be
German.
Yes, and this is why the northern Italians, who are the most German, are also the ones who have a white supremacist party that wants independence from Italy. The Lega Nord in northern Germany is all these blonde-haired and blue-eyed Lombards.
So's Venice.
Yeah.
You just mentioned language. We can look back. English is technically a Germanic language. So the flow of people and the flow of language kind of shows us how things got here. But that's just, if I had more time, we could talk about comment sections and how crazy and stupid those can be. But I said in the video about Thomas Sowell how Europeans invented race, and somebody had a problem with that, despite facts and evidence and proof and sources. They had a problem with that, and so like I said, I threw out some names, and they didn't like it.
And
I watched that video.
Thank you.
And the whole idea of race was so that the Spaniards and the English could hate each other. This whole notion of the famous Shakespeare quote of quoting a Spaniard talking about the English, only mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the noonday sun. That's a racial slur by the Spaniards against the English in a day when the Spaniards and English considered each other different races. The term used the anti-Italian word that starts with a D and ends with an O was originally invented by the British to describe the Spanish. I might as well say it. They said it on TV in MASH. Father Mulcahy's nickname was Dago Red.
Yes, he was.
Because he was an Irishman, but he was a priest. And all the priests that people knew were Italian. And Dago was the old slur for an Italian in the U.S. But it comes from a British slur against the Spanish, and it has to do with Catholicism.
Well, that's the thing about whiteness, especially pertaining to American history, to where the Jewish, the Polish, the Irish, they weren't considered white. The Italians weren't considered white. Eventually, over time, not only were they considered white, but they also had a common enemy, which was black people.
Yes.
And we cannot be brought into the fold of whiteness. I don't want to, and we shouldn't have to. But that's part of it. When you said, people don't know what whiteness is, it's this made up thing in order to bring about the inferiority of others, in particular Black people and brown people. And, I just, like I said, at this point, I don't understand why people would deny it. I mean, I was about to say, I don't know what they would get out of it, but, views and money and contracts and advertising dollars.
Very true.
Because people have this weird notion both of guilt and of how they feel about themselves and about goodness. And they really believe as a portion of their identity, which is hilarious because they're the people who complain about identity politics left and right. Their whiteness is really important to their identity. The fact that they're a white person is important to their identity, and they will not let other people forget that it's important to their identity. Yeah. And yet they will be the ones to complain about identity politics when people call them on this crap.
I mean, if you want to see identity politics, look at who the forefathers would let vote. It was white men who owned land. That's an identity, and that was politics.
The democracy was referred to as the mob by the founding fathers. Any notion of letting people vote was referred, and letting the people vote and the votes of the people actually decide things was referred to as mob rule.
Not just a great song by Black Sabbath.
The founding fathers were partially because the original state constitution of Pennsylvania said this said in a way that implied that breaking up big land holdings would be a good idea. The original state constitution of Pennsylvania said that the greatest threat to equality between people was huge concentrations of wealth, which then creates the automatic statement, well, that means we got to break up these concentrations of wealth to protect democracy. Well, obviously, that's a threat to the rich. And who were the founding fathers? Well, Benjamin Franklin was the richest person in the entire continental United States and was probably richer than anybody in Canada at the time, too. So Benjamin Franklin was the first self-made millionaire in American history, even if being a millionaire wasn't really a thing yet. That's how wealthy Benjamin Franklin was. George Washington was almost as rich as Benjamin Franklin.
But don't forget the patroon system in New York State that, was really what they were trying to keep intact.
Well, so
basically it was like sharecropping for white folks in New York State.
Philip Schuyler, who was Alexander Hamilton's father-in-law, was the biggest patroon landowner in Albany.
Well, the whole county of Rensselaer, he owned, basically.
Yes.
Well, I'm just going to try and give our friend Jeff an exit because he seems.
Yes.
And then you and I can continue for a few more minutes.
Sure.
Please.
Well, no, hey, see, this is exactly why linking up and meeting people is dope and necessary, especially for people on the left. It was great meeting both of you. Connor, thanks for reaching out.
I would love to have you on the show again.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I apologize for my lack of communication. I'm still, it's a skill I'm still working on, but thank you for the conversation. Actually, I learned a lot and I appreciate y'all and I wish y'all well in trying to appease the algorithm. It's not easy.
All right. Thank you.
I wish you well too. Thanks. Pleasure to meet you, Jeff.
Have a good night, y'all.
You too. Well, so we can get back to patroons and how they how the Dutch lived on even past the expiration date of 1687.
Well, the Dutch landowners were still the whole.
But Schuyler wasn't totally Dutch. He was actually more English than Dutch, but he loved the Dutch so much that he replicated everything they did.
Plus his wealth, despite the fact that yes, he was more English than Dutch, his wealth came from a paternal inheritance that happened to be Dutch patroon.
Mm-hmm. But that was like all of New York. I mean, all of New York City was that way. I mean, we want to talk about that. It perfectly.
So this is one of the fun facts that will always make me laugh. After after Schuyler, the richest man in New York was a man named George Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
However, George Clinton could claim to be a plebeian because he wasn't a patroon and didn't rent out land the same way that the patroons did. And so he would refer to himself as a plebeian because he did not engage in the same scale of landlordism as the patroons. And people bought that and accepted him as a common guy, even though he's the second richest guy in New York.
Yeah, well, that's always good, right? I mean, it's always good not to be the guy that's being the real schmuck. Just be a little less.
He was Thomas Jefferson's vice president, the supposed Democratic Republican champion of the common people.
Sure. Yeah, but even
let's talk about Jefferson's debt. Well, no, that's a whole nother show by itself.
Jefferson's
debts
was just a physiocrat. I mean, if we're going to be really honest about what Jefferson was, he was a physiocrat, no doubt about it.
Well, absolutely.
I mean, he thought everything was about land. That was the real power. He thought everyone was going to have their own little farm and have a few slaves on it. He had like 100 slaves on his. I mean, a little more than a few.
No, you have to understand the economics of colonial Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Slaves were the free cash of colonial Virginia. If you've heard the term cash poor and land rich, that describes the big Virginia landowners very well, unless they had successful side businesses like George Washington. Washington was considered a tremendous pioneer in both the way he ran his farm and in the way he ran businesses on his farm and in the way he connected his businesses to his farm output.
Right. There's a really good study I was reading.
But it was all only possible because of slaves. And he was only able to raise the money for most of these projects because he would sell slaves when he needed more investment capital.
Right. One of the states with the highest level of slavery in the colonial period was actually South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And it also had the highest level of entrepreneurship with the slaves.
Yes.
Because in its constitution, your slave could have a side job and you could get 40 or 50% of whatever they grossed. In fact, one guy made so much money, he bought another slave to do his field work. This is a slave buying a slave to do field work.
Well, this is why somebody could say, oh, slavery was good for black people because he learned how to be a blacksmith, and being a blacksmith meant he could afford to buy a slave to do the field work. And now all of a sudden he's almost like he's a citizen. Well, not really, no. And it requires him to own another slave to almost be like a citizen. That seems like that's requiring too much from him.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a really good study that was done on it in the 80s. And you just find out all these interesting facts about it, and you start to really think.
And people who had a job in the city but lived on a plantation had to have what was called a work pass to come into the city. And they had to have slave patrols to check those passes. And that's the origin of urban policing in America.
Yes. And it's not that different, really, though, ironically, from ancient Greece. I mean, basically all of the bureaucracy in ancient Greece were slaves. I mean, those were the guys that were doing the tax collecting, making sure, the merchants were paying
slaves, yes.
And, the reason why these rich white guys could sit up there and citizens and do, nothing but, gossip about each other and make a few laws is because they had like 50,000 slaves running the mechanism of their democracy. And we just reproduced that.
Plus, then you had all of the people who, I can't remember the term that the Athenians used. It's slightly different from the term that the Spartans used, which is different from the one the Thebans used, but it meant the same thing. The people who lived in the city and were resident of the city and who were
resident aliens,
loyal to the city, but who still were not citizens.
Right. Yeah, everyone had that.
Like, for instance, the reason that the Lyceum, where the Lyceum, sorry,
Mhm.
Greek Lyceum. The Lyceum where Aristotle taught was not the property originally owned by the Academy, which went to Plato because he was a citizen and could own property.
Mhm.
The Lyceum was a free space where anybody could sit and speak with anybody else. And the reason Aristotle taught there was because he wasn't a citizen and he couldn't own his own school in Athens.
No, he couldn't because he was Macedonian.
It was even more complicated than that. He was from a city called Stygia, which was technically a barbarian city that had been conquered by the Macedonians, and their population had been enslaved and sold. And so his parents had been slaves, and he was considered, and he was essentially in that same category of not quite citizen in Macedonia that he was in Athens and in other places in Greece that he went.
But I'm just saying that in general, Macedonians weren't considered Greeks.
No, they were not.
And they still don't consider themselves Greeks. And they don't like to be Greeks. And they every once in a while they shoot at the Greeks.
Well, the modern Macedonian thing is different than the whole ancient Macedonian thing. The ancient Macedonians very much considered themselves Greeks, and there were whole wars over the Greeks not considering them Greeks.
Oh, I know, but I'm just saying. But
and
right
I just want to picture Antigonus the First, shaking some Corinthian by the collar. Am I a Greek yet? And the Corinthians saying, I'm sorry, no.
But that's what I'm getting is the great irony now is that, right? So even though the modern Greeks and the modern Macedonians are still kind of fighting that same fight, whether or not they're truly Greek or not, the Greeks love to claim Alexander the Great, who was Macedonian, as theirs.
Of course.
He's Greek. Everybody else isn't. Just him. Not his father, not his mother.
Fun fact about Alexander. Alexander's mother was Greek. Alexander's mother, Olympias, was the sister of the king of Epirus.
But you usually get, I believe in that time.
Which, funny enough, the Macedonians thought that Alexander being half Greek was disgraceful.
I know.
And when Philip married a younger Macedonian woman named Cleopatra, Cleopatra's father got up and made a big speech and said, and may the new marriage bring a legitimate heir to the Macedonian throne. And within a few months is the weirdest thing, but somebody killed his ass.
Yeah,
it's almost like Alexander was pissed or something.
Those kind of things aren't too popular to say around somebody who wants to get world domination. That's how stepmothers and stepfather-in-laws and get knifed in the middle of the night and thrown into a river.
And every single woman related to Alexander practically ended badly. For no other reason than because they were related to Alexander and the Macedonian royal family, and the politics of the time required them to be either victims or horrible people to not be victims.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the horrible people were victimized at some point eventually anyway.
That's true. But, and that kind of brings us right back to the horrible people that run the media.
Yes, well, you know how that goes.
They just switch sides. They no longer kill anybody. They just, smear you in the media.
That's funny.
So I was thinking about how these media channels are growing up the way they are.
Yeah.
And, you just got a new co-host, Renee Johnson, which I think is a great move for your show.
2 co-hosts. We're gonna be alternating with Renee and Bess Godin from Millennial Splaining.
Oh, that's great. That's going to really improve your numbers, I think.
I hope so. I mean, I find that it is easier to motivate myself if I'm answerable to somebody else. If I have a co-host, then I have to be able to tell them what I'm doing and what's going on, which means I have to actually run the show.
Oh no! So you didn't do it just because of greed. You did it out out of an altruistic need to better the show?
I did it because I need to motivate myself to work, and being responsible for someone else is more motivation sometimes than just, oh yeah, I got to do a show this week.
Let me see if I can dig up to come on it. So who's coming on your show on Sunday?
This coming Sunday is Ben Theobald, who has not been on the show for a while. The last time
Isn't he a Green Party?
He is. I'm not 100% certain of his party affiliation. He was at least partially involved with Democrats when we first met. He is a member of the Champaign-Urbana, Illinois DSA chapter.
Okay.
He has a radio show on a public radio station in the area. It's based out of Champaign.
Well, that should be interesting.
He is involved in local Palestine activism, and I'm hoping to touch base on local COVID activism because he was part of a group that was helping to try to pressure politicians to keep people's electricity on during the part of the pandemic when people were having a hard time working in that part of Illinois.
If I remember correctly, the DSA in Illinois has some seriously problematic people in office right now with COVID responses.
Oh, sure, but I'm talking about grassroots.
Well, I know grassroots. I'm just saying that we really need to get him to put some pressure on these guys that are like aldermen in the.
Well,
area.
They were chasing. Well, they were getting city councils to endorse their programs. Champaign had endorsed their no shut off proposal. They were pressuring. They were pressuring. Pritzker enough that he had lied about his powers as governor a couple of times to say why he couldn't do something.
That old chestnut.
And that actually made it into The Intercept. We were able to get them enough attention for that some of the reporting on that got into The Intercept. But I do want to touch it. So I want to touch base some on the COVID activism too, if possible.
And that's definitely been what I call a hit or miss topic on the independent streams. You know, I mean, we have some groups that are pushing still. I mean, you got like, I wouldn't call them extremely liberal or extremely leftist, like Punch Up Pod. They're big on COVID.
I know the Punch Up Pod people. They are long time associates of mine. I won't say that we're necessarily super, super close, but I mean, they've always been in part of the same general community I've been part of. We've always followed the same people. We follow each other. We're in some of the same group. We've always been in at least one group DM somewhere.
No, I'm not saying they're bad or anything. I'm just saying they're really
pretty solidly.
They're really
solidly
left.
Oh,
you
yeah.
think they're really left? I don't know. I mean,
I have no use for either Bernie Sanders or the Republicans guy these days.
He does seem the most left. I mean, I was just saying on an average.
Yeah.
But
I think very highly of Punch Up Pod.
They're doing a really good work on COVID. I mean, and then you got the other extreme, like Jimmy Dore, who's doing really bad work on COVID.
I don't consider Jimmy Dore and the people associated with him to even be progressive anymore. They seem like they've gone off to do their own MAGA thing.
They're not. He's clearly the. I mean, he said that the show grew out of a comedy routine that he called Citizen Jimmy.
Yeah,
and you can tell that now that the new comedy routine is Führer Jimmy. Well, okay. Right, Deputy Führer. He's a few steps down.
You know, so you ever watch the movie version of? I hate it when my brain shuts off like that.
Well, give me a couple actors.
V for Vendetta. You ever see V for Vendetta?
Sure.
You remember Colonel Prothero, who was the voice, and he did the talk show where he complained about the rest of the world all the time? for the Nazi government of England. That's who Jimmy Dore wants to be in his perfect world. He wants to be that Colonel Prothero guy going off and having everyone fawn over every word he says, and the powers that be in authority basically putting him in that position. That's how he sees himself, I think.
I think now he does. You know, I mean, and he's done a lot of bad journalism. He, you know, I mean, the guy routinely misses facts. Routinely.
Well, he doesn't bother to do journalism. He makes a whole lot of noise and
yeah, he does. But
the people he has on who represent journalism are people whose journalistic ethics I sometimes question. The gray zone folks.
Yeah, well, they are clearly anti-LGBTQB, both of them. Max Blumenthal and his wife, Anna Primple.
I don't know about Aaron.
I don't know about Aaron Mattei personally, but Aaron Mattei
but he works for them. He still works for them. He still defends them.
He seems to, you know, he's on the fringe, I would say right now. You know, I could definitely see him coming out saying that wokeism is killing the world. And who else is another interesting one that I think really needs to, you know, just come out and finally say that he's not as godlike as he likes to present himself as, and Christian-like, and that's Chris Hedges.
Chris Hedges, I haven't kept up on what Chris Hedges is doing right now. I'm not up to speed. I was very disappointed to see him first draw a line against participating with Proud Boys and Oath Keepers in protests, not knowing that Proud Boys and Oath Keepers were participating in the protest that he was participating in, and then upon finding out that they were, moving the line over and saying, yes, we do have to work with Proud Boys and Oath Keepers after all.
Well, he did more than just say that. He wrote 2 whole pieces, 2 long.
Well, the first one was the one that drew the line, said, well, not Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. And then the second was the one that moved the line over because he had realized, oh, there's going to be an Oath Keeper at this event. And so now he had to say, okay, yes, Proud Boys and Oath Keepers too.
Yeah, but it was worse than that. It wasn't just, you know, we have to be on the same stage as them because we might overlap in this one small area. It was
we have to join forces with them and be in solidarity and all this other garbage.
Well, there was that, but he even wrote a whole huge rebuttal to any complaint about what they stood for in that piece. I mean, he went as far as to say that they were being persecuted and that no one was persecuted. He used all their mythology about, you know, the Clintons.
He was the first person to go out. He was one of the first people to warn us that they were fascists.
I know. Well, then he did 180-degree.
So I guess he feels. Has he apologized for persecuting them yet?
Guess not.
Because when that happens, that's that's not good.
Maybe this is this seems to be his apology to them, right? I mean,
yeah, I don't like that.
I think I sent it to you. His second article was just absolutely crazy. It was all about how, you know, they were, you know, attacked harder than anybody else just for doing, you know, peaceful protests. I mean, there was anything but peaceful.
So first, there haven't been any Proud Boy peaceful protests. They hurt people.
That's number one. Number two is there was a whole bunch of texts that they had and everything else that said, you are absolutely right, Ethan. Dore is right wing.
Yes, he is.
And the only reason this is the first time I've done that is because this is the first time I've had a comment that I've actually figured out how to do it with.
And, you know, TYT too. TYT is also right wing. I just want to go on the record and say that I still have to stand by my statement, which I've made many times, that Jimmy and Cenk are the same dude.
They're definitely brothers in arms. I'll give them that.
I mean, as far as the way they think and their worldview and how they see the people around them and how they interact with politics and their opportunism and self-centered view of the world.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, it is definitely an egotistical operation there. But getting back to Chris Hedges and that paper he wrote, it hit all of their favorite grievance mythology. The Clintons are getting special treatment. Right. He goes onto a big section of it. It talks about how Clinton lawyer this was the only one found guilty of something.
I mean, so and, you know, there were lots of really bad things the Clintons do.
Right, I agree. But I'm just saying that it's all this same mythology that has been growing around since 19.
Vince Foster and Seth Rich
Vince Foster. There was that woman that made all that money in the 90s selling VHS tapes of these conspiracy theories, and it all linked into, you know, the libertarian movement that grew these Proud Boys, is where I was going with that.
Yeah, the white supremacist the pro-white supremacist libertarianism in reaction to Waco and Ruby Ridge.
Right. Especially Waco. I mean, that was like the final straw that really blew everything up.
But that's the whole thing about that is it's like, I mean, why did Waco become such a cause celebre with the right? I guess because it was the first thing that they could really sort of say, the government's going after someone for being Christian. That's not exactly what it was, though.
Well, it had two of their favorite things, right? I mean, it had guns, Christians. It totally ignored the fact that the guy was illegally making machine guns.
Also, the fact that the legitimate Seventh-day Adventists consider all of the Davidian groups cults, even before you get to the fringe that was Koresh's specific branch Davidian group.
Did you see the Showtime documentaries on it?
I did not. I was not particularly interested.
Well, you should watch them, not because they're particularly good, but because they soft pedal a lot of problems with the Branch Davidians. You know, I mean, the fact that he was literally marrying 13-year-olds.
Well, this is the thing that I mean, let's remember. We saw this with the FLDS thing in Texas and New Mexico too,
sure,
or in Jeff's. There are a lot of groups that still call themselves Christian and are still viewed as Christian by some of the weird evangelical groups who most people would call cults.
Yes.
And the direct effect of this is that evangelicalism has become more cult-like.
Yeah.
As I mean, and you know, I'm not going to pretend that evangelicals were the most stable American Christians in the first place.
Well, Christianity has got a lot of unstable groups. I mean, it doesn't matter what denomination you there's subsects of it.
But if we're gonna go with radical Christians, though, give me the Diggers and the Levelers and the Munster Anabaptists any time over the weird.
Well, yeah. Yeah, definitely. They were definitely way more benign than your radical Catholic groups.
Well, there wasn't anything benign about the Munster Anabaptists. I mean, to be fair, they did some unpleasantly violent things to rich people who were known for mistreating the folks they were in charge of. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that they weren't very harsh in some areas, But the Munster Anabaptists believed that they were responding to social injustice that required harsh measures because of the unlawful powers held by both Catholic and Lutheran authorities and by the government of the city of Munster.
No, I agree. But what I was getting at is that overall they were not, they weren't burning 300,000 women at the stake like the Lutherans and the Catholics did in Germany at the same time.
No, they got burnt after. In fact, there is because pacifists are pacifists, there is a certain masochism associated with celebrating the martyrs of the church. One of the seminal texts of American Mennonites and European Mennonites, for that matter, though most European Mennonites are in America now, is called Martyr's Mirror, which is just this grisly history of all the Anabaptist martyrs, starting with Jesus' original disciples and going forward from there. So basically every horrible thing that was ever done to somebody because they considered themselves Christian is in that book. And pacifism is, sort of celebrating this martyrdom as a heroic conquest of non-believers.
True. But I was going to just try and push us back into more towards our topic tonight.
True.
That so I was thinking that, and that's very true that they're on the outside, but I think we have to start asking ourselves a question about how these independent media really see those hot topic issues like those that drive, and how they can turn those into ways of creating blockbuster hits for themselves.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's really by glomming onto those, even those very what you call fringe elements, right, with maybe only 1,000 fans, as Kelly, who started Wired magazine, used to write about. He saw that as being like the number you needed to get the long tail, as he called it, to work for him in this economic model. And what I was getting at is that you have these big aggregators, like for retail it's Amazon, for movies it's Netflix, or Disney, or any of those providers now. But for content producers, it's been it's been YouTube, now it's TikTok, Twitter, and what else would you say? Spotify?
See, I don't. Spotify is a commercial corporate site.
But
you have to have an in. I mean, you don't just get your stuff on Spotify. I said.
Well, Substack has a deal with Spotify where you can link it to them.
Yeah,
and that's what I do, and that's probably why I'm getting so many views on my podcast from there.
That makes sense.
And so what I'm saying is that those and that really helps to drive these smaller fringe ideas out into the open, and really makes larger accounts have to counter it somehow, right?
Yeah.
So we got to look at like Jimmy Dore as being a very savvy self-promoter.
Sure.
If anything.
Definitely,
and,
I would agree with that.
He crystal ball, they licked their finger, they put it up and saw the breeze was going in this one direction, and they said, okay, that's who I am today. And that's really I think one of our biggest problems is that when we make everything about the monetary end of this spectrum, we of course have to sell out.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a given.
That's a big part of the problem. If money is your number one goal, well, you're going to make the most money if you find out what people are buying and sell it. This is true. I've always been trying to talk to the audience I want, with the idea that eventually it will be there.
Well, I agree. I agree with that. I mean,
I've seen varying levels of growth at various times over the course of my career, such as it is. I have a moderately large Twitter presence.
I would say that you have a really respectable Twitter presence.
I have a YouTube channel that's there. I have Substack and Patreon that are there.
I got a Patreon account. It does nothing.
Patreon is where the part of this that earns me money comes from. The only way to pay me right now is to be a patron on Patreon. I haven't set up anything paid on Substack because they require an account with a specific bank.
Do they?
Yes, they require an account with a specific bank to set up a paid. I can't remember the name of the company, but specific people. You have to set it up with them, and I didn't want to do that.
That's, well, you know why. I mean, they're getting.
I just wanted. The reason I like Patreon is I can turn it on and connect it to my PayPal, and it pays right into my PayPal. It's easy. It's simple. I don't have to have a dedicated bank account for that account. I can just link my PayPal to it.
I don't have anything paid because, well, I don't think that I don't think my content is deserving of being paid for just yet.
I feel the labor that I put into my content is deserving of being paid for if people are getting something out of my content to agree with me.
I don't know. Maybe I just have a low self-esteem or something.
I don't like asking for money. I don't like promoting. I'm not a good self-promoter. And that probably has something to do with things. But I'm trying to promote more. I'm trying to put stuff out there more. I'm writing, but it all comes down. There's very little people are viewing content on Patreon, it feels like, but it is the most effective way. It was the most effective way for me to set up a place where people can pay me. But if nobody's looking at content there, then I'm not going to add a whole lot of new people paying me.
No, you're not. Patreon, I don't feel, converts over. It isn't easily linked with other stuff.
Well, Patreon links to Twitter right now better than Substack. I link my and that's really the thing I like about Patreon. So I will say this. One of the functions one of the creation options on Patreon is to link something. So you can link all your other media from all your other sites into your Patreon, and then all the people who are paying you money can then go in and see all your links to all your other media everywhere else, plus whatever you actually publish on Patreon.
Well, that's good. Maybe the problem was that I tried to make Patreon free, and they didn't like that too much, and everything kind of went all haywire.
Well, so the way that it works now is that Patreon is designed to have a base pay, but it allows people to follow you for free. That's a the free membership is a new feature. The free membership seems to hurt the paid membership. I could be wrong. I don't know.
Well, that's another thing I don't really like about it, because it's designed to create these little classes and cliques within your viewing group.
Well, I don't like to do that, but I like to give people choices, because people do really like to have choices about how much money they want to give people.
I know. I mean, to me, I think that it's, I made all my choices the same price, and it got really upset at me. You got all the same things, and you had it was like, okay, this is how I figured how much I wanted, which was like $2.50. And I figured if I got 100 people, I'd have $250, and I would pay for what I wanted to do with it. Nothing more. But it hated it. and it was like, no, you can't have that. You have to have more. You have to have more tiers on this one and less tiers on this one. And
yeah, I know what you mean.
And I thought, well, that's not what I want.
Oh, thank you. I need to go.
Okay.
I got to start dinner, which I forgot.
Well, it's a great time to end the show then.
And thank you very much. I apologize for being late too.
Oh, that's okay.
I got started with dinner and then forgot about it. And now I got to get back to it. But thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. It was great to have you on, as always, Chris. And I hope everyone enjoyed the show. And we'll see you next time.
And I'm Eclectic Radical everywhere. Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, Substack, easy to find.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you very much.